Welcome back to Darklight Archives, where we dig deep into the shadows of history to uncover the eerie truths lurking beneath the surface. Today, we're exploring the dark side of the Golden Ages, those times in history when humanity seemed to thrive. But was everything as golden as it seemed? Buckle up as we dive into the shocking secrets behind the most celebrated eras of the past. When we think of ancient Rome, visions of gladiators fighting for glory in the Colosseum might come to mind. But the reality, far darker. Many of these gladiators were enslaved or prisoners forced into combat. Often, they fought to the end just for the entertainment of the Roman elite. Imagine standing in an arena knowing your life was just a spectacle for the crowd. The Golden Age of Rome came with a dark price. Next up, the Renaissance, a time celebrated for art, science and discovery. But it was also a time when plagues ravaged Europe, particularly the Black Death. Around a third of Europe's population was wiped out, with entire villages left empty. Bodies lined the streets, and cities struggled to bury them. For all its advancements, the Renaissance was haunted by disease and decay. The Industrial Revolution brought technological miracles to the world, but what about those working in factories? For many, it was a nightmare of poverty, injury, and the end of life. Children as young as 6 worked in mines and mills, often losing fingers, limbs, or even their lives. These so-called golden times for industry were nothing short of brutal for the lower classes. The Victorian era is often romanticised, but it held a dark secret: its treatment of the mentally ill. Victorian asylums were overcrowded, and patients faced horrific conditions, with many confined and restrained for years. What's worse, many who ended up there were simply inconvenient family members or those with minor illnesses. It was more like a prison than a place of healing. China's Ming Dynasty was a period of cultural prosperity, but it came at a cost. The dynasty's rulers enforced their power with brutal public and severe punishments. Even the slightest crimes could lead to the end or brutality. Beneath the luxurious courts and stunning architecture, the Ming Golden Age was built on fear and absolute control. The Age of Exploration sounds thrilling, with tales of adventure and discovery. But for indigenous populations, it was devastating. Conquistadors brought violence, disease, and slavery to the Americas, wiping out entire civilizations. The so-called discovery of new lands led to suffering, exploitation, and the near destruction of entire cultures. Ancient Greece, often celebrated as the birthplace of democracy, was a society built on contradictions. The Golden Age of Greek democracy excluded women, the enslaved, and foreigners. A vast portion of the population had no voice, with the luxury of democracy reserved for a privileged few. Their democratic society had a much darker, exclusionary side. The Edo period in Japan is known for its stability and culture, but it was also marked by a strict caste system. The samurai enforced a brutal code, and commoners lived under constant surveillance and repression. Any deviation from social norms was met with swift and severe punishment, showing that beneath the tranquility was a strict and often violent regime. Known for jazz flappers and booming prosperity, the Roaring Twenties in America had a dark underbelly. Racial segregation, lynch, and the suppression of women's rights were rampant. For marginalised groups, it was a time of struggle rather than freedom. The glitz and glamour often overshadowed the dark realities many faced every day. We end our countdown in ancient Egypt, one of the most famous civilizations of all time. The pharaohs are celebrated for their monumental achievements, like the pyramids, but these massive structures were built by enslaved workers, forced into hard labour in dangerous conditions. Many of these labourers endured immense suffering to create what we now admire as a wonder of the ancient world. History often highlights the successes, the glories, and the progress. But, as we've seen, every golden age casts a shadow. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this deep dive into the darker side of history. And join us next time as we uncover more hidden truths here at Darklight Archives. Until then, stay curious and stay cautious.